And you guys can talk, like you don't have to just stare.
Yeah.
We can still talk to each other.
Now we're live, so just know that, because
Yeah.
sometimes
just gonna
we have to be
connect
texting
it
people,
to
you're live,
Facebook.
you're live.
Yeah, so I'll have to apologize because I am in a studio here, but I'm connected to a dance studio. So if you hear some booming pop music, it's jazz too.
I was wondering about your background.
It's a
Yeah,
great,
this is actually a set. It's a TV.
Okay.
Okay.
Nice.
Is it for Liz
That's
Estrada?
awesome.
No, I work at LAT Studios, and this is the set for their live show.
Oh,
Oh, cool.
So they were
I'm
kind
gonna
enough
go
to set
grab
me up
my
with some lighting.
headphones. My children are screaming. Hang on. Hold on.
So Kayla, Josephine actually has 6 kids.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
So I learned so much about Lisa in the past like couple of weeks, least of all how to say her name, but about her family as well. It's so interesting.
New mom. I mean, new mom again.
Yes. I had to stay at work because I didn't want the 4 kids to be banging on the door.
Probably the smarter choice. I can't find my headphones. We're just gonna cross our fingers. They just know you guys can't hear the screaming. Oh,
We weren't able to
Funny,
hear it
like
earlier.
being tortured or something.
oh well. All right. That'll be okay.
I had a student today whose husband was doing yard work, and I was like, that's loud. Can you? Like, I want you to be able to unmute and talk, but whatever power tool he's working with, it's really loud.
I have a little bit of experience with that too.
We're all being more gracious, I think, than before.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You have to be gracious in Zoom world.
Okay, everyone, so we do have participants in already. Just a reminder to everyone in, the chat and the Q&A are open, so feel free to, oh, Dr. Acosta's listening. She says hi. But feel free to use the chat or ask questions as we go on and as we participate. So very excited to have everyone here, and people will just keep coming in as they want. But if you want to start your intro, I think we're good.
Great, awesome. Thank you so much, Kayla Suarez. Kayla does an amazing job for us at the YWCA El Paso in so many different roles. We really appreciate her. My name is Ann Horak. I'm a board member of YWCA El Paso and a board member of YWCA USA, and also a UTEP faculty member. And I'm so happy to welcome you tonight to this courageous conversation, The Silent Minority No More. YWCA El Paso has been hosting courageous conversations over the last few months around topics that we feel need to be discussed more in our community. You can go to our website, ywcaelpaso.org, and find the link and see some of the videos of our past courageous conversations. This one tonight is responding to the increase that we have seen in anti-racist, anti-Asian racist acts and rhetoric and violence, including the shooting of 8 people in Atlanta. And so we're deeply committed to this work because our mission is to eliminate racism, empower women, and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. That is a mission that we truly believe in. And so I'm so honored tonight to have the panelists with us. And to introduce the panelists, I'm going to introduce our moderator for tonight. Lisa Bielamowicz is a board member of El Paso YWCA, and she is also a products control manager at Marathon Petroleum. Thank you so much, Lisa, for agreeing to moderate tonight and to add your wisdom to tonight's event.
Thank you, Anne. I appreciate it. Like Anne said, I work for Marathon Petroleum here in El Paso at the refinery. And my background is that I'm a chemical engineer. I went to UT Austin and I've been working for a little bit over 19 years now. I actually was born and raised in Dallas, Texas. So I'm also a native Texan. So joining me tonight is Dr. Selfa Chew. She's a professor of history at UTEP. She's also a contributing faculty member of the Women and Gender Studies, African American Studies, and Asian Studies programs. Her research focuses on racial relations, the Asian and African diasporas, and World War II. And we also have Dr. Josephine DeGuzman, who is a psychiatrist and lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force, who provides care to patients with severe mental illness. as well as active duty members of the military. Josephine and I are actually best friends. I've been friends since we were 5 years old, so we met in kindergarten. We have Dr. Taiko Hiroi, who's a professor at political science at UTEP. She's a contributing faculty member for Latin American and border studies, Brazilian studies, Asian studies, and intelligence and national security studies. And finally, we have Kaylin Walker, who is a senior dance and women's and gender study major at UTEP. And we actually have a piece that she's put together for a senior thesis that we're going to share this evening. So before we begin, I just wanted to remind everyone a few rules and guidelines. So profane, hateful, racist, or discriminatory language will not be tolerated. We are here to be respectful of each speaker and the participants. Personal attacks, speakers or other participants will not be tolerated also. And then anyone whose comments or participation is deemed counterproductive or not in the spirit of the event or violating these guidelines will be removed from the webinar. And then finally, any opinions stated are those of the individual speaker and do not necessarily represent the views of the YWCA El Paso del Norte region or any branch of the United States Armed Forces. So we're going to lead actually with the piece that Kaylin Walker put together. I think you'll find it to be a very thought-provoking video.
Sorry, give me 1 second. I set it up wrong. Lisa, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
According to the shape of my eyes, I should be good at math. And I probably suck at driving, and I eat dogs. According to the shape of my eyes, my last name should be Wong or Young or Fong. And if you tug your eyes into slits and tell me Cheech or Chong, I'm going to want to slug you. According to the shape of my eyes, I have a virus. I am the virus. Forget dogs. I eat bats. I am a bullseye for racial epithets. I do not deserve the white man's respect. According to the shape of my eyes, where are you from is an appropriate conversation starter. My name doesn't matter. My person doesn't matter. Don't tell me you don't see color or there's only one race. Social constructions carry real implications. According to the shape of my eyes, I speak English really well. According to the shape of my eyes, I am seen as exotic. I am a fetish, a porn category, and a submissive maid or schoolgirl. I am her male lady, his mail order bride, their prostitute, your object, according to the shape of my eyes. According to the shape of my eyes, my skin color is yellow, but I burn pink, and I bleed red, and I scare white, and I sick green, and I bruise blue, and I shit brown, and I peel orange, and night black, and burn pink, and bleed red, and scare white, and sick green, and bruise blue, and shit brown, and peel orange, and night black, and sunshine is yellow, right?
Kaylin, can you kick us off by describing, how you put that together and what types of experience you had that led to development of that piece?
Yes, sure. So in the summer of 2018, I was in a show at the Ywca Dinner Theater. I got cast in South Pacific to play the South Pacific Islander. But I'm not from the South Pacific, I'm from China. I was born there and adopted by a white woman during the height of all of the international adoptions that were coming out there due to the one-child policy. And I was just thinking that summer I was also taking a course at UTEP called Race on Stage. Race as in like ethnicity, not like race car driving. I wrote that as my final. I wrote that poem. And I've been performing it as a part of the Ywca. And then for my senior capstone, I decided, well, actually, I was like, I want it to be about yellowface. So I chose these 4 movies that either had examples of yellowface or examples of just really very stereotypical portrayals of Asian people. And then I recreated them, and I tried to recreate them frame for frame. And then as I was collaborating with the musician, he was like, do you have anything? And I was like, well, I'm using this poem as inspiration. He was like, that's perfect. Why don't you recite that poem and that can be the song. So it was really such a collaborative effort between myself and other UTEP students and UTEP alumni. And I added a verse because he was like, it's not quite long enough, my collaborator, Jonathan Reyes. And so I wrote another verse where I say, according to the shape of my eyes, I am seen as a virus. I am a virus. Because this was happening, let's see, I rewrote it like last fall. And I think I've never experienced, well, thankfully, racial violence due to them thinking that I brought a virus here, but I know other people have, and I've collected the experiences that I've heard of other Asian Americans and Asian people, and kind of tried to weave that into the poem, and not speak on the behalf of them, but just kind of share experiences of other people.
Thank you, Kaylin. I think I love the video because it addresses some of the stereotypes that we often experience or see for Asians and Asian Americans. So, I'll throw this question out there. Let's talk through those stereotypes and how has that impacted those of you, here in El Paso or here in the country.
So a couple stories from my medical training. I trained at Texas A&M, and we did our clinical years in Temple, Texas. And I had someone say one of your exact lines from that piece, Kaylin. I was treating a gentleman at the VA hospital, and he said, "You sure do talk good English." I mean, literally just like that is how he said it. And all I could say was thanks. And then I had another experience also during that time in my life where I was flying on an airplane, a commercial flight, and I was in an exit row. I was the only Asian person in that section, and the flight attendant asked me, just me, if I could speak and understand and read English. And she didn't ask anyone else in that section that. So, as a 20-something-year-old I'm born and raised in Dallas, in that area. And that was probably one of the two of the first times where it really, really stood out that, hey, I look different than a lot of people. And because of that, people have these presumptions about me and assumptions. And so I think really many of those stereotypes I've experienced myself, and I can relate. And I think a lot of people can probably relate to your piece.
I think this is a very, very difficult conversation, right? It is very painful to share some experiences, and some of them we even try to forget them. But a very recurrent comment that I have heard throughout my life is regarding my body, how strange it must be, in how different parts of my body, I cannot even mention them right now because they are very intimate, are different from the rest of the communities everywhere I go. So it's painful. It's painful to hear that we are different physically, morally, linguistically, but particularly uh, eh, I feel we are looked at times as freaks, no, and there is not even any evidence to prove that we are actually different from the rest of uh, from the other human beings, right? So.
Hey, Dr. Chu, can you touch on just the history of immigration here to the United States and how that's kind of had different levels of influence on the culture of hate towards Asian Americans?
Right. The immigration of persons of Asian origin or from Asia is actually directly linked to colonization or intervention in other areas of the world. And so imperialism is, as I said, very much related to the search for a better place to establish themselves as immigrants, or to go to work to provide a better life for their families in Asia. And so in the Americas, there are different histories in different areas, but in particular in the United States, the United States laws of immigration were pretty harsh, and not only the immigration laws, but also some other internal regulations and codes that affected persons of Asian descent as much as persons of African descent in the United States. But one piece of immigration law that is a determinant factor on how the United States society looks at Asian immigrants and Asian Americans is the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which prevented any person from China, from China's immigration to the United States. And that was practically the first piece of immigration that that limited the entrance of a specific group of people based on race. And that was also later reconfirmed or confirmed by other pieces of immigration 10 years later. For example, the Giddy Act of 1892. But it wasn't only the Chinese Exclusion Act that addressed the anti-Asian racism that was being built in the United States. The Gentleman's Agreement that also limited the immigration of Japanese persons did add to that Chinese Exclusion Act. Plus another law that is remarkable in our view of how women from Asia have been particularly targeted on the basis of an assumed an assumed, how can I say it? As I said, it's so painful for us. Lack of moral, right? Lack of principles that were acceptable in the United States. It is the Page Law. The Page Law did allow the immigration officers to scrutinize persons from Asia, but they particularly targeted Asian women as suspects of coming into the United States for immoral purposes and as prostitutes. There were other laws, internal laws, that prevented persons of Asian descent from being witnesses in any case. So that canceled their civil rights. Automatically, they could not present any report in the police station because they were going to be prevented from testify on their own behalf. And that's another another piece of law that limited the quality of life of persons of Asian descent. The fact that they could not become naturalized citizens of the United States also limited greatly the access to rights, resources, and representation. So there are several other legal pieces, such as the Land Alien Act in California that prevented Japanese immigrants from having, from acquiring land, right? From being allowed to increase their wealth through their work because they could not own property. And the law was not racist in the language. It didn't say Japanese immigrants cannot acquire property, but it said persons who could, something like this, right? It's not literally, but persons who cannot become naturalized citizens cannot acquire property, and that was automatically an exclusion for persons of Japanese descent. So this is our only example. There are many other examples of how legally persons of Asian descent have been limited in, as I said, in their access to rights, resources, and representation.
So this is something that came up a little earlier, to talk a little bit about, and maybe this is for Kaylin or Dr. Heroy, how that history that Dr. Chew just shared, and I know that there's even more that you could share because it goes even further back, but how that ties into the stereotypes that you presented, Kaylin, in your piece, and how those two work together to lead to some of the violence that has been experienced.
So I think in order to understand in discrimination against Asian and people of Asian descent, and also anti-Asian hate and such, Dr. Chew said, I think it's very important to understand the historical context as well as the global and economic context. So not only do Asians look different from the traditional majority of the people in the United States, but also in a lot of cases historically and also global economic context as well, a lot of times there is Asians are viewed as rivals, right? So there was a war. During the Second World War, Japanese people were basically fighting with Americans, and that sentiment still stays very strong. When I was 20-something years old, that was a long time ago. I was like walking in San Francisco, and I was followed by a group of people, and I was yelled at by people saying Pearl Harbor, never forget, right? So that kind of sentiment is very strong and in the States. And there was also the Korean War. There was also 9/11, and also the economic threat. In the 90s, Japan was considered to be an economic threat to the United States, even though Japan was an ally of the United States, because Japanese economy was growing really fast that time. And now it's China. Right, China is considered to be an economic rival of the United States. Depending on the statistics you look at, Chinese economy is larger than the US economy, and that kind of shift happened several years ago. So there's a lot of insecurities that exist in the United States in terms of how they look at people from Asia and Asian countries. China is also not a democracy, and the United States and China being superpowers nowadays, being rival, that kind of have created an environment where certain groups of people feel that it's justified to take certain anti-Asian actions against people of Asian descent, and they feel that that they can do something like that, and that there's nothing wrong about it. And that kind of thing was exacerbated by the pandemic, and with some of the rhetorics by some of our political leaders in the country.
So there's two. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kaylin.
That dehumanization, I think, ties into what Dr. Chew was saying about this history of exclusion and this history of othering. And in regards to us being Asian women, we find that this dehumanization goes into our sexualization and how we are seen, as to what Dr. Chew was alluding to, we're seen as sexual objects, and the stereotype that Asian women were coming to America to destabilize the morals by being prostitutes. So now there's this not now, but then there is a generalization that Asian women are prostitutes. And now, as we see with this recent devastating acts of violence in Atlanta, they're running on that. They're saying it wasn't race, it was their sexuality. It was the fact that they were prostitutes. But just reducing it down to that ignores this history that Dr. Chew was talking about. It ignores the ways in which that we are sexualized based on race and how we are perceived as other and inhuman, less than women, just because of our ethnicity.
Yeah, I think this intersectionality, like intersection of being Asian and being women, is a very important factor to understand what's going on currently, and in the event of the Atlanta attack. But a lot of times, so some statistics reported for year 2020, the overwhelming majority of people of Asian descent who reported anti-Asian incidents are women. So it was like 68% of the people who reported being, attacked, being discriminated against, face some sort of anti-Asian incident. 68% was women. So it's very unique in that sense, that the target of the hate crime and hate incident, the majority of them is women. And this is related to the stereotype of Asian women being submissive and also subservient, that makes Asian women and women of Asian descent an easy target for hate crimes and discrimination.
So let's talk through some strategies that we might have used in order to kind of change that narrative around dealing with these stereotypes. So I can speak to a personal experience I've had where, when I was dating, prior to getting married, of course, where someone, told me that he only preferred Asian women. And it was a weird thing to hear, And then, as I'm learning about his history, he's only dated Asian women before me, which is a little bit strange. And to me, and I shared with this with y'all before, I just want to be Lisa, right? I've got my own personality. Yes, being Asian is definitely part of that, but just to be singled out like that was weird. And so kind of made it a point to make sure that, with my relationships and such, people do see me as myself. It's certainly a big deal. I have 2 daughters, right, that I'm raising. And I think about that too. I think about how people perceive them and how important it is for me to raise them with the understanding to be true to yourself and to be strong, but also be aware, right, of what's out there, because they could be viewed as exotic or a target in some ways. And so there's definitely a different thing when it comes to parenting Asian females for me that I worry about. And I've got a 14-year-old daughter too, so it's like that's that age, right? So I don't know if y'all can share anything to that effect. Ways you've navigated the stereotypes and been successful.
So how to navigate the stereotypes and being successful is a very, very complex task and difficult, because we try to tend to overcome racism through compliance with the expectations of being, again, very hardworking persons, silent, right? Because if we know that we are gonna be we are going to be looked at in particular ways, so we don't want to cause trouble. We want to demonstrate that by being hard workers, we deserve to have a place in our community, society, work, and then that ends up confirming stereotypes, right? So I think we have a hard path in front of us.
Yes, I just want to add, we are called the silent minority for a reason, because we don't tend to be very vocal about the fact, that we're different, and in a way that's harmful, like you said. And it's really important for us to speak up and have these courageous conversations like we're doing here tonight.
Lisa, I just wanted to jump in, because what Dr. Chew was saying is like the perfect segue into your story with your name when you were growing up. And I just think that leads to a whole other conversation about the importance of our names and where we come from and what they mean to us. So when she was talking about being quiet and complying, I think that your story really, really falls into that.
Yeah, so what Kayla's describing is my maiden name is actually Nguyen, which is a Vietnamese name. And when I was growing up, I actually went by Lisa Nguyen and not Lisa Nguyen. And I didn't really understand why. At the time, I realized later that my mom was doing that to protect me. So, she didn't want me to have to go through the hassle of explaining how to pronounce my name properly. So I went by Lisa Nguyen, and my brother went by Chris Nguyen. And it doesn't sound really anything like the way it's supposed to be pronounced. And it wasn't until I was much older and was, meeting other folks and that people started saying my name correctly. Now in Vietnamese, obviously I would say my name correctly, but my parents, they both immigrated here, met here actually, and they have accents, but my brother and I do not. And it's one of those things where you're kind of taught to assimilate in a way, right? just behave, like everyone else. I remember not wanting to share that I ate Vietnamese food majority of the time. I was like, yeah, my mom makes spaghetti and meatloaf, which she did. She did make, non-Vietnamese dishes, but the majority of the dishes we ate at home were probably eaten with chopsticks. But I remember just like not wanting to share that and feeling not comfortable with that part of myself, which makes me sad now. So I do make a lot of Vietnamese food at home, and we embrace that. So anyways, so yeah, there was pieces of me, I think, that I was trying to be tucked away, that I was Asian, but I mean, all the, obviously can't hide everything. But that strategy definitely changed as I grew older, because I realized that was not how I wanted to be. So definitely matured in that respect.
So I have kind of another story. So my parents were born and raised in the Philippines, and they actually met in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, of all places. Immigrated separately and met there. But I have clear memories growing up of going through the drive-through of restaurants, and I was in the back seat on the driver's side, and my dad wouldn't order at the, he has an accent. He wouldn't order at the drive-through, and he would make me do it. And I would get so nervous and so anxious, and I was so mad at him that I'm like, why can't you just, you're the dad, why aren't you ordering for us? And it was because people had a hard time understanding him in Mesquite, Texas, where I grew up. And I think on a subconscious level, he said that, that told me on some level that, hey, maybe you exactly try to assimilate, try to be just like everyone else around you. Don't stand out, or only stand out in good ways, in like being good at math. I actually went on to get a math degree. That was my major in undergrad. Now being older, having my own children, I see that I think he was trying to protect us and me, and not, which I can't imagine how hard that must have been for him to have to be embarrassed or feel kind of ashamed of his accent when, my gosh, he moved to a different country and can speak, multiple languages and dialects. I mean, so yeah, it's quite a journey, and I know we have a ways to go, but I'm really happy that we're talking about it.
I want to address something that Dr. Hui was also talking about regarding, the political climate often has a lot of influence over the sentiment in our country. So she mentioned World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War. I mean, there's lots of events. COVID is now, of course, causing an accelerated hatred towards Chinese folks, and lumping us all in with that, even if we're not of Chinese descent. So, I think the big message that I try to convey when I hear about this anti-Asian hatred is, we are here in America for a reason. My parents chose to live here, actually. I chose to stay in America and raise my family here. And I don't live in Asia. Not that I wouldn't want to later, maybe in life, but so to carry that hatred and project it onto folks here locally is ignorant in a way. And I think it's really important that we explain that we chose to be here. We like being here. We're tax-paying citizens that left some comfortable lifestyles in a way, because we didn't agree with the political views of the country, because we felt like we would have a better future for our families. And it's truly, all of us are trying to live the American dream like all the other people that came here. So I think that's really important to recognize when it comes to that sentiment. And it's not just towards Asians, of course. I mean, it's towards all ethnicities who experience that. And I think that's something that we forget. And like what Dr. Hui said, is sometimes our political leaders don't do a great job of helping that. And I think we have to really convey that message.
So I actually just got texted a question, and I think Dr. Chew, this might be in your wheelhouse, but everyone can answer. I know we're all in El Paso except for Dr. DeGuzman. So the question is, how is it different, or what is the experience being a minority in a minority majority city like El Paso, right? Does that change the dynamics of anything?
Well, if you allow me, because I am multiracial, I identify myself as a Chinese indigenous person among other classifications, and so I navigate different worlds. Living in El Paso has afforded me a view of Latin American communities, Latin American originated, right, communities, and the Mexican American communities are considered majority in El Paso, right? And so nevertheless, they have been minoritized. They are considered a minority, and they are actually a group, social group that that within a racist society is oppressed. It is oppressed. Maybe numerically in numbers, a majority in El Paso, but in terms of actual power, actual political power, actual access to resources, actual quality of life, they are in a clear disadvantage, right? So the history of the Asian immigration in the Americas is very important to our current state of affairs in El Paso. Why? Because persons from Latin America do also carry a history that brings the global, transnational, and regional and local circumstances to their perspectives of Asian persons. And in Mexico, being anti-Chinese is can be considered an offense. If you tell a person Mexico is a racist country or racist society, most Mexican persons are gonna tell you, no, that is not true. But if then you explain to them your own experience and also the history of Mexico, then they start realizing that racism is actually part of the history of Mexico, and anti-Asian racism is very much part of it. We can just remember how Spain transported enslaved persons from the Philippines into New Spain, right? And also how they were called Chinos. Although they were Filipinos, they were called Chinos. From even in the 17th century, there was already this tendency to identify any person of Asian origin as Chinos, and that was not what was happening, because there were forced immigrants for the most part from Japan, from Filipinas, from China, from India, etc., right? But everyone was termed as Chino. And so there are different episodes of violent acts against persons of Asian descent. And we can cite the Mexican Revolution, but we can also cite or other examples under the colonial world, where this arrangement of society in hierarchies, where Europeans were at the top, did determine a very limited place in society for persons of Asian descent, and thus they were exposed to violence under the European rule. But then the Mexican Revolution also shows how anti-Asian movements took place to blame persons of Asian descent for the economic situation of the country. And then later, the Second Great War does bring this displacement of persons of Japanese descent, even when they were citizens of Latin American countries. They were transported into the United States and then given the status of illegal aliens in the United States. And then persons of Japanese descent in any relation to Japan were also displaced, and they were incarcerated in Mexico or in the United States. So this is happening in the borderlands, where Mexican American social groups appear to be majority. As I said, they are majority because of the numbers, but in terms of political power, economic power, they're not, or we are not. But these anti-Asian movements in Latin America determine also the relationship to persons of Asian descent in El Paso or in any other place in the borderlands where this type of demographics take place. And so there is already a pre-established relationship where stereotypes play a large role in this development of relationship. And we need, I feel that we need to break this circle, right? This circle of misunderstandings, of stereotypes, of antagonisms that are unproductive, and that we need to, as Lisa has said before, to take a look at the person that is in front of us and see that person as a human being with specific characteristics, a specific history, and with all the rights to achieve their own dreams and their own objectives. And I don't know if I explained myself, but this is my take on this history of a minority in relation to another minority, specifically in El Paso, how we bring other histories, other very, very deep histories.
Thanks, Dr.
Into the
Chew.
conversation. Yes.
I wanted to bring up the concept of the bamboo ceiling. It's something that's recently come up, where a lot of folks are starting to experience what they consider a bamboo ceiling in the workforce. So we mentioned it before. We're viewed as kind of the submissive, silent, hardworking types. You know, put them in the corner, give them the calculator, they're going to get the job done and work really hard, but not necessarily perceived as leaders. And so there's actually a book around the bamboo ceiling concept and how folks are having a difficult time navigating that stereotype. And it's an example of where, in a way, a stereotype that can be considered positive to some is actually being negative to folks' careers. So I just wanted to throw that out there. If y'all have had experiences with that, I mean, we've got 3 doctors on the panel, so imagine that you've somehow broken that bamboo ceiling yourself. And if you can share maybe some strategies or stories around that.
This is a very interesting concept of bamboo ceiling that again, like you know, like a recent thing that happened, for example, in Washington D.C., right? When Joe Biden administration has been making statements about, you know, expressing concerns about anti-Asian hate incidents that's been increasing in the United States. But as of late March, Joe Biden's administration didn't really have, you know, high-ranking API diversity that was called on by 2 U.S. senators, and they almost threatened to boycott, you know, legislative initiatives promoted by Joe Biden's administration until, you know, the president explicitly commit to include API diversity in his cabinet. So that was one of the things that are important in terms of descriptive political representation. But personally, a lot of Asian women, especially from East Asia, like smaller in stature, have the, you know, the stereotype of the image, you know, of the Asian women is also, as I said, subservient, quiet, submissive. So even when I'm speaking with someone, and if I have colleagues, of like male colleagues, or even female colleagues that are not Asian, usually people's, you know, people I speak with, they look at someone else, right? And I am not usually getting any attention. So I have to make an extra effort to get people's attention and to give confidence that I am also as capable as my male colleagues or even like female colleagues from other minority or majority groups. So that kind of implicit image, right, the stereotype, actually does place hindrance to the promotion of people of Asian descent, especially women in the positions of leadership, I think.
Well, I think, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead, Dr. Chew.
Okay, yes. Definitely, that ceiling is there, and even though I feel I am in a very privileged position as member of UTEP's faculty, I can always identify situations that tell me that we still need to do a lot of work in that regards. If I attend a meeting with my colleagues and I arrive with some of them, there are persons who do not know me and they assume that I am the assistant, that I am there as a clerk, not as an equal participant of the conversation. And very often I feel I am being schooled or explained very, very basic ideas, concepts, or information that is part of my profession, that they should know that I know. and so I think that, or I remember also when I was younger, when I was young, the stereotype of, oh, you are here because you are very exotic and you are kind of an ornament, but you are not here because of what you know or what you can do. You are here because you are adding that exotic element to this group of people, right? So I don't know if that's still the case, and I assume it is, because at this stage, because of my age, I have a different treatment by other persons. But I really think that there is more than two intersections in this issue, right? It's not only about gender and race, it's also about class, it's also about age, it's also about language, it's also about religion. And so as we know, the more complex the intersections are, the more vulnerable persons of Asian descent are, and even more so women and members of the LGBTQ community, right? Or non-Christian persons and so on. So the list is long, but every factor does place an additional burden to persons of Asian descent.
I just wanted to ask Kaylin specifically about, not to age anybody else on the panel, but she's the college student that we have here. So what is your experience as a younger person? And do you think that everything that's been discussed this evening, are things getting better, worse? Does social media make it different for someone in your generation?
So I don't think I've experienced this boundary ceiling that you guys have talked about yet, outside of performance, which for me would be like how good I was at singing and dancing, that maybe on a Broadway stage, I wouldn't be able to play anything but Miss Saigon, you know? And I see this kind of changing, and then I don't know what's next for, how the experience will be as I move on to my hopeful graduate degrees, knock on wood, and these higher levels of education, because right now in UTEP, they think they're very, very diverse, which is wrong. UTEP's all about diversity, but we're kind of homogenous, as we have a majority Hispanic demographic. So Asian people make up like 1% of the UTEP population. And I know, like, personally know one other Chinese American student at UTEP that I've made friends with, because they kind of, you know, I have very much grown up under white privilege because my mother is white. So I don't connect with those international students in that way. So I don't know if I can talk about the language barriers as well that Dr. Chew was referring to, because I have quite assimilated, and race doesn't play a big role in my education because I work with lots of people who help make it so that I don't feel excluded. But I can hope that in the future that it doesn't become a bigger flashing light. But as we can see now, no proximity to whiteness changes the assumptions that are made about me when they look at me. I had someone come up to me. This was apparently a pickup line. I don't know what people are thinking, but I'm just walking by myself and someone came up to me and I've never met them. And their first thing that they said to me was, "Are you Asian?" And I just don't pick up people that way. I just wasn't effective. So despite me being like, oh, I don't think about that, I do think about that a lot. And apparently other people think about it too. I cannot have a conversation with a man without them asking about my ethnicity, which I found interesting because I'm like, you know what? Women don't ask me this. Only men do. That's so weird, so weird. So I try to not feel confined by this bamboo ceiling, but all the while, the more I keep living, I kind of see it. It's pretty distant, but hopefully it doesn't get any closer. Or maybe hopefully it does get closer and I can break through it.
What kind of advice do we want to give? This is kind of coming through some of the Q&A as well, to our friends who want to provide allyship to us and support and want to change that narrative around these stereotypes and how to help their fellow Asian friends and colleagues. Like, what kind of things can we tell them and how to address these issues?
I would like to say that education is a big help. If we want to build alliances, affinity groups, we need to get more informed, to know our history as a community. If it is El Paso, if it is the United States, if it is the world, we need to know how history has a place in our perception of persons and groups of immigrants in the diasporas and so on. So I would say that education in many realms, not only history, but every field of knowledge has something to offer us to understand other human beings and to collaborate, to build a better world, to not the stereotype, to not accept the stereotypes, to always ask persons how do they identify, or how they identify themselves and how they want us to name them, in what terms and so on. So I guess that education, information, communication, being open would be fantastic to witness in persons who are around me.
We had another question regarding how is the current activism movement viewed by elder members of the community? Have we seen anything from your friends around that piece, Dr. Chew or Dr. Hiroy?
Well, in the social media groups that I am a member of, I know that there are different initiatives. One of them is the grassroots, right? the members of the communities that are organizing to be in the streets and to ask for more police presence to address the issue, although it brings other issues, right? We are dealing with the not yet solved issue of police brutality in certain communities. So the presence of police to try to assist elder persons may also be a potential additional issue, right? So we really have to be very careful with every move that we make to address the anti-Asian violence. So that is one. Another initiative is different organizations that that are Asian American or who are having formed to address the matters, right, of the needs and the dreams and the objectives of persons of Asian descent are also trying to get more events like this for education and conversation, open discussions of what is happening in our communities. And so those are some initiatives that I know of. I don't know if Dr. Hiroi knows of anything else.
Well, as long as El Paso and UTEP is concerned, some like 30 something faculty members of Asian descent had meeting or two meetings actually with Dr. Wilson and Dr. Wiebe, so UTEP president and provost, to express concerns about anti-Asian atmosphere that's going on in the country. So we had opportunities to talk about our experiences, the experiences of other people in the community, and our concerns, especially what's happening is that most of us haven't really experienced, like haven't had like real personal experience caused by the pandemic and this heightened anti-Asian climate because of the pandemic, right? Because we stay home. We teach from home. Students also take classes from home. So we don't really interact with each other. And people who need to go out, they try to do it minimum, partly because of the pandemic, so they don't want to get infected, right, the virus, but partly because of the fear of being target of discrimination and violence. So a lot of Asians, not just in El Paso, but a lot of places in the United States, and in the United States, Canada, Europe, similar things have been happening. So it's not just, by no means, not just the United States, but a lot of Asians and people of Asian descent are staying home, avoiding interaction. So, but UTEP is preparing to bring back certain level of normalcy starting from the fall semester. So a lot of students will be going back to campus. A lot of faculty members will do too. And as I said, El Paso has been quite friendly to the persons of Asian descent and Asian communities. But that doesn't mean that that we can be ignorant about what's happening around the country. So we are concerned about that. So we did have those like listening meeting with the provost and the president. And UTEP president issued a statement, and that was circulated by email, which we really appreciate. And also there are some members of UTEP faculty who are trying to create an Asian affinity group. If it happens, then anyone who is interested in joining is welcome, and that would probably involve faculty, staff, students, and also community people. So those are the things that I know about that's happening in El Paso and especially in UTEP.
Just one thing before Lisa does final remarks and asks people for final questions or anything. For Dr. DeGuzman, I know that your specialty, you're a psychiatrist, and we had discussed the idea of racism as a mental illness, right? And how when something terrible happens, someone always says that racism is a mental illness or the person was mentally ill. And so I wondered if you could just touch on that for us from your expertise.
Sure. So, I think I haven't heard that as much, but I was, as preparing for this panel, I was curious. And so I think that many years ago, that might have come from, maybe some people were trying to say that. However, racism is not a mental illness. I believe racism is a learned, it's something learned from how we grew up, from what's around us, all of our experiences. And one connection can be sometimes when you're suffering from a serious mental illness, you can have delusions, right? And you can think you're being persecuted by maybe certain races. So in that context, maybe, or a common thread between some depression, anxiety is you can have some cognitive distortion. So you can have these thoughts that you believe because you've kind of they've become ingrained, but they're really not true. You can believe that I'm not as good as everyone else, or, the worst thing's going to happen today. So those sorts of things. And so, but racism is so much bigger, and it's, I do think we have to absolutely education at every level, starting with our youngest citizens, all the way up, is important. And I think just connecting with each other and reaching out to each other is a way to, continue to discuss, but also figure out ways to act and move forward. Lisa had texted me on like a group chat we have of friends about how we were feeling after the Atlanta shootings. And honestly, I didn't think about it. I think I was just numb to all of the terribleness in the world. And I didn't want to think about it. I kind of stuck my head in the sand about it. And I think after tonight, I'm feeling more compelled or called to act, if not me, then who? And so, and I think we start with those closest to us and in our local communities. And I'd like to start here in Oklahoma City, and then also maybe start to reach out to other minority groups and to majority groups, and just figure out how to make tomorrow better than yesterday.
Thank you, Dr. DeGuzman. There's a reason why we named this, Silent Minority No More. We've been deemed as, the favorite minority because we don't talk and speak up about the fact that we're a minority. And I think it's time for us to address that. There's been a lot of microaggressions that have been occurring, and they've picked up quite a bit. And I think, it's so important for us not to ignore them and to kind of address them head on. I can say that I was at a meeting, I remember last January when I coughed and someone said, oh, COVID. And I didn't think anything of it. I didn't think it was because I was Asian. And I remember talking to my husband about it and we're like, no, I don't think that was it. But I probably should have said something, because if it was, and even if it wasn't, I mean, it just wasn't appropriate. And now I kind of regret that. So I think it's really important that even when we have these microaggressions, that we don't ignore it and we talk through it and we reach out and support one another. And I love what Dr. Ywca was saying about how, UTEP got a group together and said, hey, let's talk about this. What should we do? Let's get this head on. And my company sent out something too. And it said basically, hey, we support you and we're here for you. And I mean, just sometimes like just reaching out your hand and saying, hey, I don't know what you're going through, but know that I'm here and I'm here to listen and here to help. I think that goes a long way to kind of, getting on this path to eliminating racism, because I do think that that's ultimately what we want to do. So Kayla, I think where I'm supposed to go now is to wrap up. Just wanted to give the panelists another chance to say any final thoughts or anything like that before we close. And there's a poem I'm going to share at the end as well.
You guys can stop being the silent minority right now.
I know. We're so bad.
Well, I know we're wrapping up, but there were a few questions in the Q&A that I don't know if we probably don't have time to address tonight. I didn't know if you guys saw those.
If there's any that you specifically want to address,
Okay.
absolutely, especially about the institutional changes. Some of them, about the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, we could have a whole,
right. I know.
Dr. Chew could probably teach a class on it. So we might not be able to touch on that one, but.
Got it. Okay. No, I think just the one thing I saw, I think that it's important would be to reach out to each other. And I think it was Dr. Haroy that was, people tend to lump Asians all together, but we are also different. But I think, and there are certain groups or different societies, I was part of like a Filipino student association in college, right? And there was a Vietnamese student association and things like that. But I think we can reach out to all those, I think it really will take working together and reaching out to all of those communities. And I think because we tend to be quiet and not as politically active and as, that it works against us. And y'all, we need to, I don't know. Yeah. Stop being silent. I always said that. Stop being silent, but really figure out how to be who we are here in our communities and in our country.
Right, and I agree with you that question about the Communist Party. As you say, I could put together materials to try to teach a course in two different terms or two different sections. But I would like to emphasize that we need to be looked at as human beings with very distinctive characteristics, very distinctive histories, and that we cannot just lump people in one party, in one nation, in one continent. Not at all. No, even within our families, we are very different one from each other, right? Or from the other. And so let's, I know we almost have to close this, but I want to tell you this. When I started researching the Japanese Mexican community during the Second Great War, my family, some members of my Cantonese family told me, don't you remember how Japanese were in China, how terrible was the army in China? And then some persons from the Japanese community would say, oh, that Chinese woman is coming over now. We don't want to talk to Chinese people, right? So, but then little by little, we started having conversations and we ended up being friends. And my family understood that the Japanese Mexicans during the Second Great War had a lot in common with the Chinese Mexicans during the Second Great War too. And now they talk to each other, right? So because they started to see that sometimes what is happening in the internationally, globally, or even locally, should not affect, should not contaminate the way we look at each other. We are human beings, and we should overcome our prejudice, and just work together. That's that's the best answer I can come out with right now in regards to that question, and in regards to my participation. The persons who are here right now, the women, the wonderful women I am sharing this space with, we are so different from each other, so different, yet we are here together. And I'm very happy to share this space with you. I feel very honored to be in your company. Thank you very much.
I think to wrap it up, I would like to address maybe voting. And we can elect more AAPI public officials into our offices. A lot of the time we go by name association. So I know here there was an Asian American woman running for a judge position, and actually she lost it. And in her campaign, she had said, like, please don't give into name recognition. I know I don't have a Latina last name. Please don't let that be the determining factor in your vote. It may have been, it may have not been, but she wasn't reelected. And we don't have the representation that perhaps we need to create political change that would effectively help us from, and like Dr. Hiroi was saying, getting representation up in higher places would be helpful. Addressing a question in the Q&A about trying to prevent what happened in Atlanta from ever happening again, we have to tackle that from so many sides. We have to change our perception of sex workers. We need to change our perception of Asian people and women and Asian women. And it's not really up to us to do that. We can't go up to every non-Asian person and say, hey, decriminalize sex work. Hey, don't be racist. Hey, don't project your beliefs of what is moral onto other people. That has to start from non-Asian communities. So there's so many variables there that go into what happened in Atlanta, that it's hard to say one thing to do to prevent that from happening ever again. There's so much work we have to do.
Well, thank you very much for having this conversation and for inviting me to this panel. I think this kind of thing is really, really helpful to get the information out there, and out of the racism and the stereotypes and all these things are implicit and people don't know that they have. And so just having conversation and involving people to be part of the conversation is very important, because at a personal level, even though, I sometimes want to point out something to people, right? Like, people do things without intending to hurt other people's feelings, but, they talk about physical features, They talk about stereotypes. They talk about things. It's very uncomfortable to point it out to the face of the person who you are having a conversation with. So I think this kind of opportunity is really helpful because we can talk about these things in a very casual conversation manner, and let people know that, hey, it's not right to talk about people's physical features. Hey, it is not right to judge people based on your stereotypes, right? Hey, it's not right to do this and that. So I think this kind of opportunity is really, really helpful. And so thank you very much for having this. I loved meeting with you, and this was a great evening.
Yeah, I want to say extra thank you to the panelists. I know in preparing for this, it was kind of an uncomfortable thing. I even talked to them, like I had led an Asian network at my previous work location, and it was like pulling teeth sometimes to get people to speak up about their experiences, and it tends to be uncomfortable for us. But I think it's so important for us to have this dialogue and to have this safe space for us to share our stories, not just with each other, but with all the folks that dialed in. And I appreciate that because it shows their support in wanting to understand what we've been going through or what we have gone through, what we've experienced, and what we kind of think we should do to help with the future. I think, we talked a lot about like how discrimination, racism, hate stem from a lot of sources, political, our history, our childhood. None of those are valid excuses, right, for violence or negative behaviors. None. It's important that we understand where that comes from, but cannot be tolerated at all. And assimilation is really not the answer either, right? So need to stop being silent and really embrace who we are as individuals. Remember our humanity. That's so important. And just be kind, right? So I'm going to share a poem that I wrote my freshman year in college, and it was based on an experience I had when I was in high school. I had a very small fender bender, and sorry, Dad, you probably don't know about this. But anyways, it was a winter storm. I was taking my little brother to school, and we were at a stop sign, and the car in front of me went to turn, and I let off my brake just slightly and slightly bumped this vehicle. I got out immediately, wanted to share my driver's license and insurance. I apologized. It was my fault. There was no harm to the vehicles, but he looked at me and he said, "You need to take your yellow ass and park it off the side of the road." And my little brother was in the car, and I remember thinking, oh gosh, I hope he didn't hear that because that is so terrible. So I wrote this poem kind of with regards to that. And I'll tell you, as you can tell from the poem, I went through a very kind of a lot of emotions with that. And it was, anger to eventually kind of a little bit of sadness over realizing that, I kind of need to embrace who I am. And I think that's going to happen every once in a while, not that it's okay. I wish I had said something and spoken up to him then that was unacceptable. And I think I have found that voice now where if that were to happen to me, I wouldn't let that happen. And again, like I mentioned earlier, I really want to try to raise my children to be, to not tolerate that intolerance. So, Kayla, did you want to pop that up or?
Were you sharing your screen and I overtook it?
No, was
I?
I?
Okay, good. I got it.
Okay.
Sorry, one second.
No worries. It does look like I'm sharing. I can share too if you think it works better.
No, I got it. I just it was sharing everything I've downloaded of pictures, so I was confused. But here it is. Hold on one second.
it's a little blurry, but I'll go ahead and read it and people can just hear me. So the title is, He Said I Was Yellow. With eyes ice blue did he murmur these words, a look on his face taunting me as absurd. I questioned his remark in my head, but stood still, and then like a movie, my thoughts started to reel. Of 2 languages I learned, a child long ago, and now only one did I seem certain to know. But a language was not lost, not my black hair or eyes, that was causing this man to catch me by surprise. Words unflattering, said he, but my lips did not move, nor my body to leave, it was stuck in some groove. To listen to sounds most hateful and cruel, with my head held high to not look a fool. Regrets flew around of losing the me that spoke words most pretty, now gone to the sea. Of feeling such pride in a country away far, and now forgetting who people really are. All humans with looks different, but each with a heart that binds us together yet tears us apart. With colors and labels, hateful words and stares, disregarding all that really lies there. Anger nor disgust I felt for this man, but sadness in the gift I once held in my hand. Now far yet still near, I run to embrace the truth in myself, my culture, my race. So I want to thank you for letting me host this panel. Really, really proud to be part of the YWCA and supporting our one of our mission statements around eliminating racism. You know, I think we all had to get a little bit of courage to have this conversation. And so I thank the YWCA for getting us together in one room, and looking forward to continuing our journey. And hopefully we made a little bit of a difference in those that attended. So thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.